Hey everybody, this is Mike Lewis from Awareness. I'd like to welcome you to this webinar. I apologize for getting started just a couple minutes late. We had some very, very minor technical issues that we were able to work through on the phone, so we appreciate everybody taking some time to be with us today, especially such seems like a big holiday week for everybody. And up front, I just want to apologize to everybody on the phone too. If you can hear in my voice, I've been just getting over a cold the last couple days, so if I ask Mike Volpe any dumb questions or stuff like that, I'm just going to blame it on the cold and just go from there. So I apologize. I'm going to be a little congested, hopefully not coughing too much during the call. Mike, I think I first met you from about a year or 2 years ago at the first inbound marketing summit that was out in Boston, and then again got to know you a little bit better at the new marketing summit. There's a lot of marketing summits out there.
Yeah, there's a lot of marketing going on in Boston, and certainly it's been a long, crazy journey. And you and I run in a lot of the same marketing circles, and overdose in marketing all day long because we're both involved with all sorts of things in the marketing community. So yeah, it's good to connect and good to do a webinar together.
Yeah, absolutely. And one other thing I do want to say, one last sales pitch for anybody on the line. And when I first met Mike, I knew Hubspot and had heard a lot of great things about them. And when I came on board here at Awareness, you're actually one of the first software applications that we implemented here. And, we haven't had a chance to talk about this directly, so so I don't think I'm going down a weird path with you. But since we've implemented HubSpot, we've actually been able to cut our SEO spend really significantly, over 50%, since we actually implemented HubSpot. So the ROI has been huge. So anybody on the line that hasn't checked out HubSpot yet, I can't recommend it enough. I recommend it, to really everybody else in the community that I talk to. It's a great application, and as I said, Mike runs marketing over there, so I'm really excited to have him on the line to talk about, inbound marketing and how it impacts online communities.
That's fantastic to hear. It's always great to hear from happy customers. So what I wanted to talk a little bit about today was sort of inbound marketing and your online community to kind of bring some of these topics together. And once again, I'm Mike Volpe. I do marketing at Hubspot. And I've been doing marketing mostly in the B2B space. So you see, I think a lot of the comments I'm going to make today are certainly probably colored a little bit more around lead generation and B2B because it's a little bit more of my experience. But I've been doing marketing, for tech and software companies for, about a decade, really. What I think is really cool about marketing today is that there's a lot of big changes going on. And you can talk about these changes in lots of different ways. You can talk about the internet, you can talk about communities, you can talk about social, you can talk about search, you can talk about content and blogging. But at a high level, when you think about sort of a lot of the big brands versus, that have been built, some of the more traditional brands perhaps, versus some of the newer brands that are being built today, I think you're seeing a couple things. Those newer brands tend to approach marketing and building their brand in a very different way than traditionally the companies on the left-hand side have. I think some of the companies that would fit in the buckets on the left-hand side are certainly trying to reinvent themselves. And it was actually cool to see, I think probably some of those logos, definitely I remember the McDonald's logo on, one of Mike's awareness slides. So I think those brands are trying to, in many ways, try some of these new things and reinvent themselves. But I do think when you look at the companies on the right versus the companies on the left and you think about the type of marketing you see from them, there's kind of a big difference there. And I think that really signifies that some of the things that are going on in marketing, like there are some changes going on. And I think a lot of those changes really revolve around sort of this notion of inbound marketing and combining a lot of the new techniques that you have available. So blogging, search engine optimization, social media, combining all of those things. Because what I'm going to talk today about is that there's a real interplay among all of those, and they all really, really work together. And focus too much on any individual one, and you're not going to get the maximum effect that you can. And then I've got a few comments later about how sort of, building and stimulating online communities can help you in all of these areas, actually. It's not just about social. Communities can actually help you both with, blogging and content and also with search results as well. Now, one thing that I hear people talk about a lot is the whole notion that you shouldn't be doing any marketing within social media. You should never mention your product or service or things like that. And that, anyone who's doing marketing or anyone who's a social media marketer, is just someone who shouldn't be trusted. I think that couldn't be further from the truth. Marketing has always been about communication and conversation. And certainly there are a lot of new technologies out there today that are changing that. But as a marketer, you shouldn't stop doing your job with being a marketer. Your job is to spread the good word about your products and services and try to make people happy and try to find new customers and try to solve their problems and make money doing that. There's nothing wrong with any of that. So, I know some folks are sometimes a little bit scared about trying to do marketing within social media. You really shouldn't be scared. Certainly some things to be careful about, but that's true with all marketing. There's always things you want to look out for. We at Hubspot, we work a lot with small and medium-sized businesses, and Mike and I talked about this type of stuff before as well. And sort of out of the, lots and lots of businesses that I have seen very interesting sort of conversion rates on sort of traffic to lead. So the amount of visitors to your site that actually become a lead from different social media sources. In some interesting ranges there. And I think that, some people online may be surprised that you can actually drive leads and real business from some of these sources. But, we've absolutely seen a lot of this ourselves, and I've talked to a bunch of other people that have seen rates sort of in these ranges as well. And so I guess what I would say is that I think that people should think about leveraging all of these types of marketing, not only for brand, not only for buzz, not only for support and, customer happiness and all those sorts of things, but also as a lead generation channel. And that's always been my bent because I've been a B2B marketer where, things tend to be very, very focused on lead gen, but these are all excellent lead generation channels, and you can use them that way. You can get good volume and good conversion rates too. So, we did do a survey actually at HubSpot of a few hundred small businesses. And what they told us, and again, this may not be totally analogous for everyone online, but I think what you'll start to hear is that the cost per lead for channels that leverage social, like blogging and social media, things like that, tends to be a lot lower than other channels. So search engine optimization, also very low, things like that, but lower than a lot of the other channels as well. And I'm trying to go, I don't know if there's somebody on the line that can maybe help with the slides. I am not seeing the current slides. So if there's somebody that maybe help out a little bit with that, that would be great. But I'm trying to move to slide 12 now. And there I was going to talk a little bit about how social media is now a staple. And the reason that it's a staple today is that I think social media used to be kind of a fun new toy for marketers. And people weren't really sure what was going on with it, and they weren't really sure what exactly social media could do for them. They weren't really sure sort of exactly the effectiveness social media could have. What is happening right now is that social media is becoming a staple. It's becoming a mainstream marketing technique, and there's a ton of reasons for that. But I think a lot of it is becoming a lot more trackable and things like that. I'm going to go ahead and let's see, share. I'm going to go ahead and switch to a different technique here, and I'm going to try to share my desktop.
Mike, you've obviously used WebEx before.
Yeah, can you tell? All right, so hopefully, Mike, can you? Is this now social media is now a staple coming through? Is that slide coming through?
It does. Looks great on my end.
All right, perfect, good. All right, so we'll switch to this method too. Well, I have used the tool before. All right, so social media is now a staple. I talked a little bit about that. So I think you should think about incorporating social into your overall marketing mix, and have that be sort of a routine, sort of 3 square meals a day sort of aspect to your marketing, not just sort of a fun treat that you dive into once in a while. Now, here's the other warning though: social media is not magic. Just because you get your company onto Facebook or pick your other social network du jour, it is not going to all of a sudden just sort of change things overnight. You need to think about it, just like when you first started incorporating email into your marketing, maybe 10 years ago, it didn't necessarily change things overnight. Same thing with SEO, same thing with all these techniques that have come out over time. It doesn't change things overnight. However, that doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. So, remembering that social media is really, really important, but it is just one tool, right? And as a marketer today, what you need to think about is using all the different tools in your toolkit. And don't forget, with that one tool of social media, that you're actually pretty boring. in social media unless you're publishing something interesting and you're contributing something worthwhile. So I've seen lots of companies try to get active in social media, but without a blog or without some videos or without ebooks or without some sort of content that makes them interesting, they tend not to be that effective within social. And so I think what I'm trying to drive at here is there's a number of different techniques you need to use, and social is sort of one of the major things that sort of brings a lot of those things together and gives you a large set of very powerful combined effects. But you can't forget about content. You can't forget about search engine optimization. And then social has powerful effects if you built those sort of foundations and add social into your mix. So let's talk a little bit about how sort of content and social drive search engine optimization. So search engines like fresh content with lots of links. And so what that really means is that you need to think about how you're going to produce a lot more content on your website or your websites, and how you're going to drive a lot more links from other websites back into that content. And what I will tell you is that social media is a great tool to drive a lot of links back to your site, because that promotion through social media gets a lot of people talking about your content, blogging about it, linking to it, etc. Social can also drive content creation. We're going to talk a little bit more about that later. But the ability to leverage your community to build more content on your site can be a really, really powerful search engine optimization technique as well. So I wanted to take a couple minutes here to make sure people sort of have the basics down in terms of search engine optimization. Again, this is not meant to be a search engine optimization webinar at all. But I think understanding the basics of how search engines rate content and decide what ranks higher is really important to understand what role social media can play within that, and how social media can drive more than just conversations for you. It can actually drive other aspects of your business. So search engine optimization is divided into two sort of broad categories of factors that determine whether or not pages rank, or how high pages rank for different search terms. The first set of characteristics are what's called on-page search engine optimization, and that's what's happening on each page of your website. You should and can control all of those factors exactly, because they're things that you publish on your website. The second set of factors, and these are actually more important, are what's called off-page search engine optimization factors. And the vast majority of that really has to do with links. And it has to do with the number and quality of links from around the internet that are coming into your website. So let's talk about on-page SEO, and I actually took a page from the awareness website as sort of a little example here. When Google looks at this page on the awareness website, it looks at it in a very particular order. The first thing that it looks at, and the most important thing that it looks at, is the page title, and that's what appears in the top of your browser menu bar. So here actually awareness is doing a pretty good job. They've got a good keyword phrase there. It says social media marketing, and then has their company name, because Google looks at the words that are first in that title as most important, and it's looking at those to determine what is this page about. So Google is now being told that this page is about social media marketing, which is a good keyword phrase for awareness to focus on. The other thing that Google looks at is if there's any, keywords in the URL, and it can distinguish, what may be some of the content of the page from the URL. It then looks at the headers and the content of the page itself. And here you have the big text headline in the middle of the page says "What we do, social media marketing." So that's a good keyword-rich heading as well. That's good. And then the other thing that happens on the page that the search engine looks at, and this doesn't help you rank higher, but once your page is ranking for certain searches, it helps you capture more clicks onto your link as compared to the other 10 that are on each page of results. And so here you have this description that's highlighted in yellow at the bottom there. You can actually write that. And so what you should do as a good marketer is have a good, convincing description there that's going to appear in the Google results and get people to click on your link as opposed to the other ones that appear. And here you have, awareness built on my communities for companies that want to leverage social media marketing. So it's, it's clear, it's interesting, it relates to the title of the page. It all sort of ties together. So that's pretty good. So that's what you want to think about in terms of on-page search engine optimization. In terms of off-page search engine optimization, we talked about that has to do with the number and quality of links coming into your site. I want to explain why this is. So search engines have sort of from the beginning of the internet, they were trying to figure out what pages were sort of going to make people happiest in terms of giving them those pages when they search for things. And so when you search for something, what any search engine is trying to do is give you the most relevant results, and the results that are going to make you happy and it's going to answer your question of whatever you're searching for. Now, in the early days, what search engines did is they just looked at the content of the pages. They said, okay, well, this page is mostly about this topic. People figured that out, and they started to create all these pages that were not that valuable and basically relatively sort of spammy pages, but used lots and lots of keywords. There were people that would, seed keywords to different pages and put them all in the keyword title, the keyword metadata, and things like that. Lots of things that you could do. And then the problem was that the quality of the search engine results declined. Well, the big innovation that turned Google into Google was that they figured out how to use the link structure of the web as a voting mechanism. So online, links are votes. And the more links that you have, it's like more websites voting for your website. So when Google displays results, it's ranking them not only by the content of those pages, but it's also ranking those results by the number of websites that link to you, because they're saying that that's more websites voting for you. Because when you think about it, if a website has more links, it's a higher quality website because more people have linked to it. More people have said that this content is interesting, and you should go visit it, because that's really what a link is. And this really is just like recommendations in the offline world. So if somebody told you that they knew awareness networks, you'd say, oh, okay, that's interesting. I don't know who you are. I don't know exactly what awareness networks does, but that's kind of interesting. If somebody you didn't know also told you that awareness networks, knows social media, that gives you a little bit of context around that recommendation. So that's good, and that's good for our awareness. But then the final step is if you really knew and trusted the person that was telling you that would make that recommendation a lot more powerful. And the same sort of thing happens, there's sort of a parallel with links, because they're online recommendations. So just a link to your website is good. A link with anchor text, so a link with text that's highlighted that links to your site, is even better. And then if the link is coming from a trusted website, so if you're getting links in from places like CNN and things like that, those are really trusted links, and those are going to help you rank a lot. So what all this really means is that you want to try to build out more content on your site. You want to have that content optimized and drive more links back into your site. So a key component of ranking highly in search engines and getting more traffic from search is publishing more content. So we talked now about how publishing drives search engine optimization. We know that social can spread your content and drive more links into your content. But publishing itself also drives your success within social media. This is, again, how all these different techniques tie together to really get you sort of superior results. So when you think about publishing today, I think every company should think as much like a publisher as they do like an advertiser. And especially in terms of online publishing, it can be, very, very cost effective and a great way to build your overall online footprint and also make you a lot more interesting within social media. So, we're a relatively small company. Hubspot is, we're only 3 years old, but we publish as many different, things we can in as many different channels as we can. And then once we do that publishing, we then take, most of our content and promote it through our different social media channels, because most of our publishing is less about our products and more just useful or entertaining information for our potential customers. We promote that out, which again gives that content more visibility, encourages people to share it and spread it more broadly, and it also encourages people to link back to it, because a lot of people within social media are also active within the blogosphere, and again that drives search results. So again, all these things sort of tie together. Now when you think about your content strategy, what you should think about is producing content that is link-worthy and share-worthy. So as an example of this, we publish reports like many companies do. One of the reports that we publish, because we have a bunch of data on Twitter, is the state of the Twitter sphere. And so we published this, and that was a very link-worthy report or thing that we published, because it got a bunch of coverage from some very high authority websites that are in our industry that linked back to that report. So that was great, and that helped us in terms of search engine optimization. Again, publishing good content helped us with that. But it was also very share-worthy because there were some interesting questions in there, and it was actually about a channel where people tend to share, so it was about Twitter. And so there were thousands of tweets about that report, and Twitter on the first 2 days that we released it drove a third of the traffic to that report. And so what's interesting about that is, again, the content was link-worthy and share-worthy, and that was what made this content successful. So it was content that was really built for social and built for driving SEO results as well. And so that's something you should think about in terms of your content development strategy, is what the subject of the content that you're producing, and is it link-worthy and is it share-worthy? Very, very important. Now, most people probably do something like this already of make sharing easy, but we found that just by adding a few buttons can, really, really increase by a factor of 5 or 10x the amount of times that people are sharing your content. Which again, that sharing gets more people to find you. It makes you more findable. It also helps, drive more search results for you, because people that do that sharing could spread it to people that could write about it and then link to it. Now, people might not think, though, about sharing or making it easy to share things besides blog articles. Most blogs have kind of adopted something like this as a standard. But what we do at HubSpot is for a lot of other things that we do, including webinars or ebooks or things like that are more lead-generating offers. We make those very shareable as well. And so, for instance, here's a webinar that we did recently. If you click on that tweeted button on the webinar page, you can publish a tweet about that webinar with a link back to it. And what we found is even lead-generating content, if it's good quality content, even with a form in front of it, can generate a high number. I think it's kind of mid-single-digit percentages of the people that sign up for that content will publish it out to their social networks, which then drives more people back to that content, gets you more leads, gets you more exposure, things like that. So again, not only should you make sharing your blog articles easy, you should make sharing everything easy. Why not? Just give people that opportunity. So I talked a little bit about sort of link-worthy and share-worthy content. This is kind of a more formal way to talk about that, I think, where there's certain types of content that you probably have to have, but tend to rarely be shared. Then there's other types of content that you might not have to have, but they're great marketing assets because it tends to get very, very frequently shared. So, product information, free trials, software documentation, or product documentation, things like that, tend not to get shared very much. But if you have, new, educational content, useful content, entertaining content, depending on the audience you're serving, whatever they're going to find useful, interesting, or entertaining, that's the stuff that tends to get more frequently shared. And so when you think about from a marketing perspective of what content you're producing and publishing, make sure you're leveraging both ends of this spectrum. I think too many marketers think only about the left-hand side, and they don't think enough about the right-hand side. So that's something to think about, because that's the type of content that's going to really drive your success within any sort of social program. All right, so I wanted to make sure we had tons of time for questions, because that's usually, frankly, for me, the most important part. But I do have a kind of a few minutes to kind of wrap up here and talk about some of this. So we talked a lot about content. We talked a lot about search engine optimization. And it's interesting, we actually didn't talk as much about social. And part of the reason for that is I think that, if you tuned into some of the other webinars, you're going to tune into some of the upcoming other webinars that Awareness is doing. You're going to get a little bit more kind of deeper into the social part. And I think that many people don't think enough about tying content and search into their social program. And making all three of those things work together. So that was really kind of where I wanted to sort of dive in and sort of make the contribution to this conversation. Let's talk about sort of these things and make sure we're understanding how they all connect. So SEO, or search engine optimization, helps your social media program, because if you're getting found in the search engines, that's going to help you attract more members to your community. And it really, attracting more members helps you become kind of the top community within whatever niche that you're serving. The other thing is that more and more, how you rank in Google for a bunch of keyword phrases is a determinant of part of what your brand is. And so to a degree, I don't know who ranks number one right now for the word hamburger, but that's part of the brand of a fast food restaurant, for instance, right? And I think that more and more as people use search more and more, that's an interesting sort of way to look at a part of your brand. And so, again, ranking highly in search has all these benefits, including sort of some branding benefits as well. Now, on the other side, social media and being successful within social and building out your communities and leveraging those helps your search engine optimization results. Communities tend to produce a lot of content because you tend to have discussion forums, you tend to have, user-generated content, maybe allow your community to do some blogging. There's all sorts of things that you can do there. And that produces a lot more dynamic and fresh content, which search engines love. And leveraging your community both within a community site that maybe you build yourself, using a tool like Awareness, or also leveraging communities that are existing on other existing kind of social networks, or doing both of those things help drive more inbound links back to your site. And so using both of those things together really help drive your search engine optimization results. Now, how does social help content? Well, if you're leveraging your social platform, your social networks, and your social media marketing effectively, you're going to get more views of your content through sharing it with those communities. You're going to get more comments on that content if comments are allowed, like on a blog article or something like that. And those comments add a lot of value to the content that you've published, so that's great. You can also get more inbound links, which helps SEO, which again helps that content perform better and get found more. It starts a little bit of a cycle there, which is great. And then you also get a lot more content generated by the people in that community. Now let's talk about how content can help social, so sort of the other way around. Well, if you're only on any sort of social network and you're just sort of talking about, what you're doing at that particular moment or what you did that day or things like that, and you don't have any sort of more deeper thoughts to contribute to the conversation, you're not very interesting. So I will tell you that I'm actually not that interesting of a person, but I've got this great content to back me up. So I've got all these different, people at Hubspot that are creating great content. We have access to other content, things like that. And that's, I think, what makes me actually a somewhat interesting person within social media, because I'm tweeting and updating my status with links to interesting blog articles that have been written by other people that I work with. So that makes me more interesting. And that really helps you attract more members. And then the content really can help increase the engagement factor of your community as well. So there's more content there for them to consume, interact with, and discuss. That's great, and it helps increase that engagement. And it can really, I think, improve community longevity, because if you're always producing new content, you're giving people a reason to come back, a reason to discuss new things, a reason to explore new topics, and things like that. So I think that can be really, really helpful as well. And so I'd really encourage people to sort of leverage community for marketing. Spread your content more. It's going to help you drive more links back to your website. It's going to let you create more content. It's going to help you build buzz and sort of spread testimonials and things like that. And so I think with that, the most important thing that I've kind of found through doing a bunch of sort of social-related type of marketing is that many companies already have some level of community interaction, or already have some sort of communities that have formed a little bit online and things like that. And if you ask them, they actually usually really want to help. And I think you'd be surprised a lot of times by the reaction of just giving them a place to hang out and just asking them to do a couple things. I think many people sort of underestimate the power of just doing that. And so I think some sort of combination of providing a home base for them to kind of organize themselves, and then just asking them, like, hey, here's some of the things our company is thinking about. Are you guys interested in helping with this? I think you'll be surprised at how positive the response will be sometimes. And so with that said, I think I will turn it back over to Mike so we can kind of just continue the discussion and involve some questions and things like that.
Yeah, Mike, first I just want to comment on one thing you said. Just to correct you, you are really interesting, I think. You said that you weren't interesting at all.
Again, I think it's the content that makes me interesting. I don't know.
Yeah, there you go. I'm just joking around. Hey, can you jump ahead to the next slide? I guess we might as well just jump off yours there.
Yeah, sure.
Before you
let me know if you want me to pass the ball back to you, or what do you want to do?
No, it's fine. Or just one more slide ahead, and then
Oh, sorry, I don't have that one in there. So
we'll just jump back to the regular. If we close down the share in there, I just want to, before we jump into the Q&A, I just want to make sure everybody knows about the upcoming sessions that we have. So I'm just going to change my role back to presenter.
Yep, go for it.
All right. Sorry about this, everybody, but just want to make sure you get the dates and that I have the actual dates of the next ones that are coming up. Mike, can you see that slide on your screen?
I can't see it yet, but why don't you try to do it, and I'll tell you what, I see one question here. I'll start to answer the first question. So we got a question from Christina, and she's asking, this is great stuff. How do you sell these ideas to members of management who still can't even grasp what social media or SEO is? It's a great question, and I think that it's so funny. You do a number of presentations like this, and that's one of a category of like 3 or 4 questions that are always recurring. And so I think there's a number of ways, and none of these are foolproof, by the way, because some of these people are really, really hard to convince. So the first thing that I like to do, and Christina, you may have heard this answer before, but anyone who's in senior management who doesn't really get what this stuff is, the first thing you can try to do is try to pick out something that maybe they'd be willing to spend a little bit of time in and start to get addicted to. I mean, I will tell you that I've gotten a couple marketers addicted to Twitter recently, and after that experience of a few sort of weeks of getting into that, they then start to it really opens up their eyes and they start to get a whole bunch of things a lot more. So that might be one thing to try. The other thing that you can try is just show them that there's already discussions happening about your brand or your industry online. So you can do that by using, searching in Google Blog search. You can search in Twitter search. You can snoop around on Facebook and see what's there. You can search on LinkedIn around that industry. So that's another great thing to do too that I think can really help with getting people to really understand that there's already conversations happening and it's a channel that they should start to get involved in. And then the final thing that sometimes helps too is I found that you can talk to them until you're blue in the face and they won't listen to you. But even if the same exact ideas come at them from a different angle, a lot of times with those senior folks, sometimes a book can really help. And so there's any number of great social media marketing books that might be interesting to check out. I'm sure Mike may or may not want to mention a couple, but one in probably particular that I would mention would be The New Rules of Marketing and PR, which is by David Meir. And that really takes kind of a high-level view of how marketing is changing and how you need to get involved in some of these things. And I think that that book I think can as it can many others sort of open up the perspective of those senior level people too.
Yeah, another great one is Paul's book, Paul Gillen's book, The New Influencers, and Top 10 The Secrets of Social Media Marketing as well.
Yeah, those are both great too.
Yeah, both terrific books. Just before I jump into the rest of the question, I just want to remind everybody, I got the slide up, and just in case you can't see it, because I know there's been some issues with WebEx just being able to broadcast the slides. The next session that we're having is August 26th with Chris Brogan. Speaking of books, he just came out of, Mike, I don't know if you had a chance to read an early copy of Trust Agents yet, but it's a great book. Another one that, I think you can pre-order it now at Amazon, but I definitely recommend picking up a copy of that. It's really great. Another author we're having on September 10th is Larry Weber, who just came out with a book called Sticks and Stones, which is a great book as well. And finally, Joe Trippi, and I don't know if a lot of people online know who Joe Trippi is or not. He actually published a book himself called The Revolution Will Not Be Televised. What's interesting about Joe is he's actually the guy who was the social media person behind the Howard Dean campaign when it became really big. And whether or not you like Howard Dean, kind of put that to the side. He was the guy that really started. They revolutionized with politics. People campaign for office now, including he advised Barack Obama on social media as he was running for president. So I'm really
it's so great that you're having him because I think a lot of people associate that type of stuff in politics with Barack Obama, but really the original case of that really was Howard Dean.
Yeah,
who really made use of it a lot earlier, and obviously it wasn't as successful for him. But I think when you look at all the metrics of what he's able to accomplish with the amount of money that he raised, especially, because people forget that Barack Obama actually raised a lot of money. So his campaign not only made effective use of social, but it was also very traditional in a lot of ways too. Whereas Howard Dean was very, very grassroots and very, very social. It was very, very interesting. So that'll be a really interesting presentation.
Yeah, it should be great. He tells a story about it, not to get into this too much because I want to go back to what we're talking about, but he tells this great story about how Dick Cheney was having a $5,000 plate lunch, and they went out and said, online we're just going to have a tuna sandwich with Howard Dean, lunchtime thing, and no donations required. And they actually raised more money just in that one lunch hour than Dick Cheney did with his $5,000 plate lunch session, which is pretty funny. But,
oh, that's great.
that's so just great grassroots stuff. So if you can make any of those, can't recommend them enough. They're all great guys to hear talk. But with that, there's a bunch of questions that came in during the session, and we're actually still getting a bunch coming in. One of them, and I'm going to try to summarize a whole bunch from together, Mike, is around any of the stuff that we talked about from an SEO or publishing or content perspective. Is there a difference really between that? And I know I'm kind of jumping a few of the questions out there around, but is there a difference between how a B2C marketer would do that versus a B2B marketer?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think the only difference really comes from what are you trying to use that content for. So the notion of what you should publish, how publishing can help you, or how to optimize things for search, or how to use social, all those sorts of things. I don't think there's any difference between B2B or B2C there. I do think the difference is once they're coming to your community or to your website, what you're trying to get them to do. So for a B2C company, it might just be, if you don't have any online sales, it might just be an interaction and trying to build some brand, or maybe join some sort of loyalty club or something like that, or maybe do a search for your local locations or things like that. Or if you're an e-commerce site, it might be, obviously filling up a shopping cart and actually buying something. Whereas a B2B company tends to be usually a little bit more about sort of lead generation, list building, things like that. And so I think it depends. The real big difference is what you're trying to do when people come to your site. But all the, SEO is, all the things that you need to do to be successful in search engine optimization apply to all companies. And sort of the same thing, I think, with a lot of social. So I think a lot of it really applies to kind of both. So I think that, if I were to move to a B2C company, I would be doing a lot of the same things. I think probably what I try to have people do on my site would be slightly different, but I think everything else would be about the same.
Right. Right. And actually, since you brought that up, what's interesting is now you come from HubSpot has a great name. You guys have really done a great job of branding yourselves within social media, and a lot of it through the publishing that you put out, and just having a great personality on Twitter and Facebook, and great group on Facebook, and there's a lot of education out there. We're getting some questions around, and this is probably another common one for you as well, but really, how do you start with, building that persona out there, especially in a time where marketing resources specifically are really tight? There's not a lot of budget, and a lot of companies just reduce headcount. How do you get started, and how do you build up a brand like the one you guys have built up?
Yeah, I mean, it really just sort of starts, I think you can really start small. And I think especially in this economic environment that can be a good idea to sort of do a couple pilot projects, things like that. But I mean, at the end of the day, you do need to fundamentally make a choice of if you want to start to do something new and change the way you're doing marketing, you will, especially in this environment, you will need to kill some other projects, right? It's a little rare today for people to be able to just initiate sort of lots of big new things. It's more an environment of trying to become more efficient. And so what I would say to people is that you should always be trying to optimize your marketing and understand where you're going to get the most ROI from, and then killing the lower ROI things that you're doing. Even if there's a positive ROI, but it's lower than other things you could be doing, you should be focusing your time on the things that have the highest possible ROI. And so I think a lot of the things that we're talking about today, and I'm sure in the other webinars in the series that are covered, I think tend to be very, very high ROI techniques. So I would encourage people to maybe pick one or two small projects and sort of get started and prove out a little bit of an ROI. And it really kind of builds over time. I think our experience at HubSpot, and again, we were a brand new company, so we sort of built our company this way from the ground up. But for the first few months, it can be a little bit frustrating because it takes a while for some of these things to kick in, so you're not necessarily going to be successful overnight. But stick with it because it will absolutely work over the long term, and you'll get better at it over the long term.
And you mentioned ROI, and you talked about it a little bit during the question. One of the last questions that came in before I think the Twitter API went down in TweetDeck is around ROI. It's really how do you convince people that there's a value in social media from an ROI? So I guess the real question is, how do you track an ROI with social media?
That's a great question, and there's lots of ways to do it. It depends on what the R and the I is for your business. So the I in social tends to be some spending on technology and then some spending on people's time to interact and be part of sort of managing and building community. So that's relatively not that difficult to measure, actually. So we've got a few people on our team here, and I know approximately how much of their time they spend on social and social-related activities. And so I've got a good sense of kind of what that's costing me month in and month out because I know what I pay them. And so I understand kind of what my overall investment is. And then, for any technology investments I make in that as well, you can just add that. So you got a good sense of what the investment level is. The R is can be a little different. So it depends on what your business goals are. So for HubSpot, we're a B2B company. We measure leads and sales. And so we use web analytics. We happen to obviously use our own software to do it, but there's other ways you can do that as well. And we measure leads and sales. It's one of the big things that we measure. There's a few sort of more brand-driven metrics that we look at, but those are not the most important thing to us today. So our R is, the return. It tends to be much more leads and sales focused. For other companies, your primary goal or the return that you're looking for may be brand building. And then I think there's some other types of analytics you'd want to look at. So I think you'd want to look at the sort of volume of mentions, so the number of times people are talking about you online. So within the communities that you're being active in or within online in general, are people talking about you more now than they used to? I think the other side of it would be how are they talking about you or what are they saying about you? So some level of sentiment in terms of, what are they talking about and that sort of thing. And then I think the other thing would be sort of some measure of kind of influence. So of the people that are talking about you, sort of how broadly is that message being spread and things like that. And that's sort of some of the ways that I would start to think about those things. But I think it's important that whatever metrics you have to measure your other marketing programs and campaigns that you're doing, use as much as you can things that equate to those. And I think what's great about the online space is even though, people think social is more difficult to measure, and in a lot of ways it's still easier to measure than many other more traditional marketing things you've done. It just hasn't been around as long, so people aren't necessarily as comfortable with it. But it's relatively easy to get all sorts of data about it because, the online world is so much about data and it makes everything much more trackable.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love that. We got a couple of tweets with just as you said it that it's awesome. It depends on what the R and the I are and inside your ROI. I think that's great. And Christina actually asked a follow-up question to that. Do you think utilizing the software that is out there now that measures social media ROI is useful, or should it be done in-house?
I mean, that's such a particular question in any particular company. So I think smaller companies, could maybe use some social media measuring or monitoring tools that are maybe built into another system, but having a fully dedicated system for a smaller company probably doesn't make a whole lot of sense. I think for bigger companies, especially if you have maybe a consumer brand that has a lot of discussion around it, there's just no way that a person or even a group of people can effectively make anything out of those conversations if there's hundreds or thousands of mentions that are happening each day. And so I think in those cases probably, some type of software could certainly add something to that overall process. But I think before anyone starts to pay for any of those tools, just in terms of pure sort of measurement and things like that, at least start with some of the free things that you can do. So Google Alerts, Twitter search, those sort of basic things. And just sort of, start to use those at least for kind of a week or two, and make sure you get comfortable with those, and then understand what are you missing out of those that you would like to be able to see, because that's going to help you make that technology decision a little bit more smartly, because I think a lot of the different vendors sort of in that space have different angles, and I think different ones are sort of good at different things.
Absolutely, yeah, I agree with that as well. I think, and actually Lisa has a great question here too, because you spent a lot of time talking about publishing content during the session, and so she's asking, what are your thoughts on article ratings specifically? Do they still add value? Are they a staple, and what's the best approach for them?
That's a good question. I think it all comes back to whatever community you're building or have built, and are they using it, and do they find it valuable? So, if you can look at the data and say that, out of every 100 times someone views that article, that 10 or 20 people rate it, that's great. That's a really high level of engagement. If your community likes that, then that's you should totally use those ratings. If you find that people are not using the ratings, then maybe it's less relevant. And so I think it really depends on sort of the level of community, and I think you could even ask the community in those cases. People love to be asked their opinion of stuff, and I think that would be a great question to kind of throw out to the community and see what people have to say, and just ask them, would you like us to invest in making that feature a little bit better, or do you want us to focus on building something else? One company that does this really well in the software world is Salesforce.com. Actually has a way, and I know a lot of other companies start to do this too, where people can submit feature requests, but it's not directly to the company, and then it goes into sort of, private mode where only people within the company can see it. Those get published out to the whole community, and people can actually comment on them and vote on them. And so one of the things that the product team does there is they look at the most popular ones, the ones with the most discussion happening, and, they think long and hard about, spending time and building those features. And they're not going to necessarily build every single one, but if something gets a lot of activity there within that community, you can really, really bet that that it's going to be something that they're going to really highly evaluate looking at. So I would sort of throw that back to the community and look at the data and just ask people and see if they find it valuable.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think Salesforce.com too. They're an awesome example of a company that they were in social media, pretty early actually, and taking the time to listen to their customers before it was even considered the right thing to do. In fact, I don't know if you remember, it was back in I used to, and Mike, I don't know if you know this, but I used to be VP of marketing and sales at SalesNet. We were the biggest Salesforce.com competitor for a while, and for a while they were having these really bad outages. It was in like 2005 or 2006, and long story short, people were starting blogs about it. I hate Salesforce, gripeforce.com, all these really weird blogs about how bad, the downtimes were. And long story short, instead of, going out to the, trying to, go behind the scenes and fix stuff, they listened to what the community was saying, which was basically, we don't care that it's down. We understand there's going to be downtimes. We get that. We just want to be informed. We want you to tell us what's going on. And that's when they launched TrustForce. And you watch all these blogs, all the entries that are, say, if you Google GripeForce, I think it's still up there, all the entries basically go away. There's no more comments after TrustForce went out because, they responded to what their customers were saying. They took the time to listen to everything that was going on out there, which was really important.
Yeah, and they've become really open and transparent. So that whole TrustForce thing, you can go to trust.salesforce.com, and it tells you the system's up or down.
Yeah,
and it records that over time, so you can actually look and see what their uptime is. It's really, really interesting.
Yeah, as much as I hated marketing against them, they did a really good job. They're a really good example of a company that adopted, early on. We have one more, just kind of this is kind of a more specific question for you, and I'm not sure if you have the answer to it, but I'm going to ask you anyway. It came in from Twitter, and it's how do you add links to make the sharing easier? And I think it gets back to people that are someone's probably just starting out with publishing content and wants to know the right way to make sure that there are the social links available to the content that they're posting. Do you know of any tips or tricks on how to do that, other than buy awareness software because we have it embedded in all the posts out there?
Yeah, I know. I was going to exactly. I was like, I think there's somebody who's selling some software that'll help with that. So, it kind of depends on exactly what they're doing. It's hard to know like what's powering their site and those types of things. I will give them so certainly they should definitely look at awareness software. But the other thing that they should look at is if they want a real quick and dirty way to just add a button that will allow people to tweet what's on that page. If they go to Twitter Grader, which is a free tool, so twitter.grader.com, Grader, like getting a grade in school. There's a tweet it link in the navigation there. And if you go to that tweet it link, it will allow you to actually build a button that you can then cut and paste that HTML code and put it on your page, and that you can do it and just add a Twitter button right there, really, relatively fast and simple. And then I bet you they do some searching around. I know there's a few widgets. I forget the name of one of them, but there's one that sort of has the thing that you can cut and paste and embed it in your site and allows you to share onto a bunch of the different social networks. But I do think that people, any any company who's spending any level of money on technology infrastructure in terms of their content management system or something that's going to power a community, one of the features you should look for in anything like that is, like Awareness has, the ability to just automatically have those buttons in there. So, specifically, I think that's something that you should look at, because then the good news is, like, if some other new cool thing comes along, that a company like Awareness is just going to build it right in and just roll it out to their customer base, right? So you don't need to pay attention as much to sort of what the the state of the state is in terms of technology, in terms of sharing technologies. It just sort of will happen, and that's sort of the value of buying a platform like that.
Yeah, no, and I was almost saying tongue in cheek about Awareness, because there's so many widgets that are out there right now that you can use to add sharing to your site or blog or whatever it is that you're using. That there's just a ton of options out there, and I think just doing a quick Google search is the right way to go about it. One last question I think came in just a little while ago. It's from Frank, and he asked, how do you, and this is an interesting question, and so I'm interested to get your take on it, but how do you protect yourself from others posing as your official voice out on the web, in the social web?
Great question. It can be relatively hard, but I think that that's a case where the best the best defense is a good offense. And what you should be doing is getting out there and being as active as you can in all these different places online. Because what people tend to do is, when they're looking for a group to join or someone to follow or be friends with or whatever it is, they're looking around and seeing, let's take McDonald's as an example. So, I want to join the McDonald's group on Facebook because I'm a big fan. Well, I'm sure there's multiple of those groups, but they're going to look for sort of the biggest, most established one with the most level of discussion happening. So if you get out there early and you actively promote your official group, and you do everything you can to make it, the biggest, most successful, most interesting group, then you've sort of won the battle, and then other people have a much harder time sort of getting over that. Same thing with your profile on Twitter and everything like that. So you should go to all the sites and make sure you're getting your corporate, branded user or username or usernames if you have multiple products on all of the, different sites, and that you're actually using them and jumping in there, because if you don't, someone else will. And not necessarily that it's bad that other people that love your brand are starting to do that stuff, but it's definitely less of a marketing asset when it's controlled by somebody else. So I think, again, the best defense is a good offense.
Absolutely. So, well, before we go, I just want to let everybody else that's still on the line here know that we are making it. So this session was recorded, number one, so that's going to be available, as well as the slides will make those available to you as well. So I know we got a bunch of questions throughout the session about that, and I just didn't want to stop the Q&A for that. I figured I'd wait till the end. But, Mike, I want to say thanks. It was great having a chance to chat with you, and I think the questions that came in were great. The feedback's already been terrific, so we really appreciate you taking some time.
Absolutely, my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
And one last shameless HubSpot pitch, even though I don't work for HubSpot. If you guys if you're still on the line and you liked what you heard today, you should really check out HubSpot TVs, which is every Friday, right?
Yeah, it's a live video podcast that we do. Both myself and Karen Rubin. It's every Friday, 4 o'clock Eastern is when we shoot that, and it's hubspot.tv.
It's really cool. If you have the chance, you can actually go in there, and they might even give you some beer while you're hanging out watching them.
Yeah, if anybody's in the Cambridge, Massachusetts area, come on by. It's an open invitation. We do have a live studio audience every week.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, Mike. I really appreciate it, and hope we can have you back again soon.
Yeah, I look forward to it. That'd be fun.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.